When you think about human history, you might picture the rise of Egypt's pyramids, Rome's legions, or China's dynasties. But long before any of these civilizations existed, people were already living in Australia. These were the first Australians, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose history stretches back more than 60,000 years, making theirs the oldest continuous culture on Earth. Imagine it. 60,000 years ago, the Ice Age still gripped the planet. Neanderthals roamed Europe. In Asia, humans were just beginning to form early societies. And across a chain of islands in Southeast Asia, a small group of people built rafts and sailed into the unknown. They crossed vast stretches of water to reach a land no human had ever seen before. That land was Australia. Archaeological evidence shows that humans first arrived at least 60,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. In northern Australia, caves like Majadbebe contain stone tools, grinding stones, and even pieces of ochre used as pigment, all dated to tens of thousands of years ago. This means that while mammoths and saber-toothed cats still walked the earth, people in Australia were already painting, cooking, and shaping tools. But survival here was no easy task. Australia is a land of extremes: deserts, floods, bushfires, and deadly animals. The first Australians adapted with extraordinary skill. They became expert trackers, hunters, and gatherers, learning to live in harmony with their environment. Instead of fighting against the land, they worked with it. Every plant, every animal, every waterhole had meaning and purpose. One of the most remarkable aspects of Aboriginal survival was the use of fire. Europeans often saw Australia as empty and wild, but in reality, Aboriginal people were carefully managing the land through a practice now called fire stick farming. By deliberately burning small areas, they encouraged fresh plant growth, attracted animals, and reduced the risk of massive bushfires. This was sustainable land management thousands of years before the term even existed. Another secret to survival was deep knowledge of the seasons. In Europe, people talk about 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. But many Aboriginal groups recognize 6 or even more, depending on the local environment. These seasonal calendars guided when to hunt, when to gather, and when to hold ceremonies. For example, the Yunglu people of Arnhem Land know exactly when the stingray is fat or when the magpie geese are nesting, all based on subtle changes in nature. Their society wasn't just about survival, though. It was rich in culture, art, and spirituality. Songlines, invisible pathways across the land, connected sacred sites and told stories of the Dreamtime. By singing these songs, people could navigate vast distances, finding food and water along the way. Imagine a map not on paper, but carried in memory, in melody, and in ritual. That was the Aboriginal way. Over tens of thousands of years, these cultures developed incredible diversity. Before European arrival, there were more than 250 distinct languages spoken across Australia, with hundreds of dialects. Each language was tied to land, identity, and law. This linguistic richness shows just how complex and sophisticated Aboriginal societies were, despite the myth that they lived simple lives. Scientists today are amazed at the resilience of the first Australians. DNA studies reveal that once their ancestors reached Australia, they stayed, isolated from the rest of the world for tens of thousands of years. Yet they thrived. They built trade networks that stretched for thousands of kilometers, exchanging shells, ochre, and tools. Some traded goods even reached as far as Indonesia. This shows that Aboriginal people were not cut off, but part of a wider human story. Of course, their history was not untouched by change. Over millennia, they faced shifting climates, the extinction of giant animals like the Diprotodon, a wombat the size of a car, and rising seas that drowned huge coastal plains. Yet they adapted, adjusted their stories, and kept their culture alive. Think about it. When the last ice age ended and sea levels rose, Aboriginal oral histories recorded these events. Those stories have survived in song and tradition, for over 10,000 years. To understand the scale of this achievement, compare it to other civilizations. The Roman Empire lasted about 500 years. Ancient Egypt lasted a few thousand, but Aboriginal culture has lasted more than 60,000 years. It is not just the oldest culture in Australia, it is the oldest continuous culture anywhere on Earth. And it continues today. Despite the challenges of colonization, dispossession, and modern pressures, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples remain the custodians of their lands and traditions. Their survival is not just physical, it is cultural, spiritual, and communal. To walk in Australia today is to walk on a living museum where every hill, every tree, every star has a story. So next time you think about human achievement, remember this. While empires rose and fell, while continents changed, the first Australians carried on. 60,000 years of survival, knowledge, and culture, an unbroken chain linking the past to the present. That is not just Australian history, it is human history at its most extraordinary.